Every driveway has that one crack you pretend not to see. Mine started as a tiny hairline, the kind you tell yourself isn't worth worrying about, and after a few winters, I could lay a pencil down inside it. So I did what you've probably done. I went to the hardware store and stood in front of a wall of crack filler, picked the one that promised the most, and squeezed it in on a Saturday afternoon, feeling like I'd finally handled it. 8 months later, it split open again, right alongside the patch, a little wider than before. So I bought another tube, then a bucket of resurfacer, then the gray squeeze bottle kind, then the foam backer rod and sealant kind, because surely that was the one I'd been doing wrong. I added it up once, somewhere north of $200 over a decade, and all I had to show for it was a driveway that looked like a dry riverbed and a shelf in the garage full of half-used product gone hard in the tube. And then I found out the truth. I wasn't using the wrong filler. I was skipping a step, a $1 spray step that's the only reason any filler ever holds in the first place. And I didn't learn it from a hardware store. I learned it from a 40-year-old dairy barn floor that had never seen a single tube of crack filler. What gets sprayed on that concrete doesn't fill the crack. It does something stranger. It turns the crack itself into stone, harder than the slab around it. And the recipe traces back to an agricultural extension circular from the 1940s that quietly stopped being reprinted right about the time the patching aisle at your hardware store started getting longer every year. Stay with me, because if you already own a home with a cracked driveway, a sunken garage slab, or a patio splitting apart at the seams, this next part is built for you specifically. Let me tell you how I ended up looking at that floor. I was up near Leola, Pennsylvania in the spring of 2021, looking at a dairy operation because I'd heard the family kept their milking parlor floor in remarkable shape. And you have to understand what a milking parlor floor goes through to appreciate what that means. It's the hardest used concrete on any farm. Cows standing on it twice a day, water running across it, manure, the acid wash they clean it down with, hooves grinding the same spots year after year after year. Most farm floors crack, pit, and start crumbling inside 15 years. This one was 40 years old and still flat, still tight, still shedding water the way it did the day it was poured. I asked how, and the answer wasn't a special mix. It wasn't an expensive contractor. It wasn't anything you could buy in a kit. It was an ordinary brass garden sprayer, the kind you'd use to spray weeds, and a habit of misting the hairline cracks 2 or 3 times a year like you'd water a windowsill plant. I asked what was in the sprayer. The answer was one word: glass. I thought I'd misheard. Here's what you have to understand first, because none of this makes sense until you do. Concrete is not a rock. It never finishes becoming one. When cement and water are mixed together, microscopic crystals begin to grow, and those crystals are what lock the sand and the gravel into a solid mass. But here's what almost nobody tells you. That reaction never completes. It gets maybe 60% of the way there before the slab dries out, and once the water is gone, the reaction simply stops. Roughly a third of the cement in your driveway never fully reacted. It's still sitting in there, dormant, sometimes for 50 or 60 years, holding a chemical called free lime, calcium hydroxide, just waiting for the one thing it never got enough of, and it isn't water. It's a particular dissolved mineral that has to be carried into the concrete by water. That mineral is sodium silicate. You probably know it by its old name, water glass. It's the same thick, syrupy liquid people used to preserve eggs in before they had refrigerators. The same stuff used to fireproof fabric 100 years ago, and it still sells today for a few dollars a quart. When you mist it into a crack, it goes looking for that free lime, and the two of them react, and together they grow new calcium silicate hydrate. That is the exact same crystal that made the concrete hard in the first place. So follow what that means. The crack doesn't get patched, it gets regrown. Capillary action, the same force that pulls water up into a paper towel, pulls that liquid down into the hairline. The reaction fills the void from the inside out with brand new mineral, and what's left behind is harder than the slab around it. Researchers have pulled core samples out of bridge concrete poured in the 1950s and found that dormant cement still chemically alive, still capable of reacting 60 years later. The ability to heal was always sitting right there inside the slab. We just kept getting sold rubber to smear over the top of it. And this is the part that should bother you a little, because this isn't new knowledge, and it wasn't lost by accident. I pulled a copy of a farm concrete circular put out by an agricultural experiment station in the late 1940s. It told ordinary farmers, in plain language a man could read at his kitchen table, to treat their concrete floors and water troughs with a silicate of soda solution to harden and seal them. The directions were simple. The cost was almost nothing. And then somewhere in the late 1950s and into the 1960s, that kind of advice just faded out of the extension pamphlets. It wasn't banned, it wasn't disproven. Nobody stood up and said it didn't work, because it plainly did. It was replaced by glossy new bulletins recommending branded sealers and patching compounds. Right around the time the chemical and coatings companies became the people funding the research and buying the advertising in that whole world. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is not some shadowy plot, and the real explanation is simpler and more honest than that, and that's exactly what makes it land. There is no marketing budget for a jar of water glass. Nobody is going to run a commercial for a brass sprayer during the evening news. Think about it plainly. A product that fixes your crack one time, permanently, gets sold to you exactly once in your life. A tube of filler that fails every other winter gets sold to you over and over until the day you die. One of those things builds a business with a quarterly earnings report. The other one just builds a flat driveway. So one of them got the shelf space, the advertising, the spot in the home improvement show, and the other one got quietly left out of the next printing. The knowledge was never destroyed. It was simply outspent. So here is exactly what you do this weekend. And I want to say this plainly, because I know some of you are sitting there assuming this is for people pouring a brand new slab. It isn't. This is for the cracked driveway you already own, and you do not need a contractor, you do not need a permit, and you do not need a single power tool. You need a quart of sodium silicate, which runs about $8 and will treat several hundred square feet, which means the actual material in any one crack costs you somewhere between a few pennies and $1. You need a cheap pump sprayer, the brass kind, or even a plastic one, or honestly, just a brush. And you need a stiff wire brush. Start by cleaning the crack out completely. Get the loose grit out. Dig out the dead old filler if there's any in there. Get the dirt and the moss and the leaf litter out with the wire brush and a good blast of water. Then let the slab go from soaked back down to just damp. That matters, and I'll come back to why in a minute. Then you mist the crack in the concrete a handspan out on either side of it. Don't flood it, don't pour it, mist it so the liquid wicks down into the capillaries instead of beating up on the surface and running off into the grass. Let it drink. Come back in 5 minutes and hit it again everywhere it's soaked in fast, because those are the thirsty spots. Then you wait, and here's the detail that separates the people who do this and swear by it for the rest of their lives from the people who try it once and announce it didn't work. The second coat matters more than the first. The first coat opens the pathway and gets the reaction started down in the crack. You let it sit a full day, maybe 2, and then you apply it a second time. And that second pass is what carries the crystal growth all the way through and seals it for good. The old-timers who did this on barn floors meant for heavy traffic would do 3 coats, each one 2 days apart. One coat is a start. The second coat is the seal. Most folks spray it once, look down, see the crack is still faintly visible, decide the whole thing was nonsense, and quit. Don't quit at the first coat. The first coat is just the door opening. Now here's the part nobody writes down. The part you only get from people who've been doing this for decades and don't think to mention it because to them, it's just obvious. For a true hairline crack, the spray alone is plenty. The liquid wicks in, finds the lime, and you're done. But for a wider crack, a 1/4 inch or more, the spray by itself has nothing to grab onto in the middle of that gap. So the old practice is to first pack the crack with clean, fine silica sand, tamped down firm with a putty knife, filled right up nearly to the top. Then you mist your silicate over it. The liquid seeps down through the sand, finds the lime in the crack walls on both sides, and cements every single grain of that sand into one solid piece of new stone, bonded to both faces of the crack. You're not filling a gap with a foreign rubber that pops loose the next time the ground freezes and heaves. You're growing fresh aggregate right in the spot where the slab failed. That is the entire difference between a repair that lasts 5 years and one that's still tight and flat when your grandchildren are parking on it. 2 warnings so you get it right the first time, because temperature and moisture are the whole game here. Don't do this when the slab is cold. The reaction between the silicate and the lime crawls below about 50 degrees, and it nearly stops below 40. So if it's November in Minnesota, wait for spring. And don't do it on a bone-dry slab baking in the July sun, because the liquid will flash off the hot surface before it ever has a chance to soak in. The sweet spot is a cool slab, damp to the touch, on a mild day with the concrete in the shade. Get those 2 things right, the temperature and the dampness, and the chemistry does all the rest of the work entirely on its own while you go inside and have lunch. If you're the kind of person who's tired of paying over and over to fix the very same thing, who senses that somewhere along the way, the simple answer got buried under the expensive one, then you already understand why this matters. So here's what I want from you, down in the comments. Don't tell me what you think about it. Tell me the crack you're actually going to treat. Tell me where it is, the garage, the driveway, the front walk, the patio. Tell me how wide it's gotten, hairline or pencil width or worse. And tell me what year that slab was poured if you happen to know it, because that last detail tells me how much dormant cement you've still got sitting in there to work with, and I'll tell you honestly what to expect. Subscribe if you want to keep pulling this kind of thing back out of the old bulletins where it was left to gather dust, because there's a whole shelf of it, and we are working through it one piece at a time. This isn't a man talking into a camera trying to build an audience. It's a few thousand people quietly fixing the things their grandparents already knew how to fix, with materials that cost less than a cup of coffee, and refusing to pretend that crack isn't there anymore.